Welcome to the Press Club. Thank you for coming out on a Friday night. I'm Bradley Zeve. I'm the founder and CEO of Monterey County Weekly, and welcome to Seaside tonight. If it's your first time here, this is the Weekly's headquarters. We're in a Charles Moore building. Charles Moore was a prolific architect who designed, this is his first commercial building, designed in 1959, and it became the first LEED certified platinum for existing building, certified by the U.S. Green Building Council. The architect who worked with me on the remodels here, welcome, and this is Gabrielle Chiquitance. Hello, Gabrielle. Thank you. LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. So part of the design and construction was to use all green materials and to test the building for air quality and energy consumption, waste, the diminishing energy and waste consumption. So welcome, and we hope you enjoy this, the Press Club. It's just a couple years since we've opened this up, and the idea was to connect our readers of the Weekly more with the community. Really just do more face-to-face, just what we have going tonight. Okay, on to tonight's program. Sitting next to me from Santa Barbara is Scott London, and welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
Scott's Scott is a California-based photographer. His work has appeared in books, newspapers, and magazines worldwide, including Rolling Stone, Vanity Fair, Newsweek, The Atlantic, Fast Company, GQ, Architectural Digest, and National Geographic Traveler. Also has been featured in Wired magazine, on CNN, and the Discovery Channel. Scott was born in Washington, D.C. at the age of 5. He moved to Stockholm, Sweden, and he was raised and educated there, well educated, we probably should say. And where as a teenager, he taught himself photography, returned to the United States in his 20s, and eventually landed on the West Coast like all of us. Scott's work's been exhibited in museums and shows around the U.S. and Europe, including one of my favorites outside of Copenhagen called Louisiana Museum of Modern Art, and the Institute of Art and Ideas in England. And he's featured in a project right now called Moving Europe, a project making its way through several European cities, including Amsterdam, Athens, and Lisbon. In 2014, his photographs of Burning Man were published in collaboration with the writer Jennifer Razor and fellow photographer Sidney Erthel in what is now a best-selling coffee table book. And I'm going to show it to you. Here it is. It's heavy. You want to hold it up?
Sure.
Thank you. Whew. I have an injury, so it's about a 40-pound book. 38, probably. And it's called Burning Man, Art on Fire. And recently, this is the first edition. It's recently been re-released in an expanded edition, about another 50 pages, if I have that right. So,
exactly right.
So thank you. This book will be on sale afterwards. It's okay if I take it away from you like that?
Really? You're going to sell my book for me?
This book.
Yeah, great.
Did you bring books?
I didn't bring any.
Okay, so we might have. So this book is going to be auctioned off at the end of the show. Do we have an offer? Okay, so Scott, let's welcome to Seaside in the Press Club.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So tell me, how has the camera, and for that matter, being a professional photographer, shaped your life experience?
Well, you know, my life as a photographer got a late start. So I started shooting at Burning Man in 2004. And it's really only in the last maybe 10, 15 years that I've been shooting as a serious photographer. I studied photography in college, and as a kid, I taught myself photography, and I had a lot of fun with it when I was a teenager, doing street photography in and around Stockholm, Sweden, where I grew up. You know, shooting street scenes and skyscrapers and play of light and shadow and interesting looking people on the street and that kind of thing. And then I would come home in the evenings and I would develop the film in our makeshift bathroom, dark room. But beyond that, I wasn't very serious about photography. I went into a career doing other things, radio, print journalism, that type of thing. But something happened when I went to Burning Man in 2004 that really sort of catapulted me into photography in a serious way.
And that was?
I thought, this is really something, but I can't describe this with words. I don't know how to describe this by explaining it. I don't know how to conceptualize this in the form of the written word. I think that in order to convey this properly, you need to do it through pictures. So I vowed to come back the following year with better camera equipment and to try to do it justice through photographs.
Some of the best photography is often planned and staged. And at the same time, that's one spectrum of photography, and the other is the magic happens catching the unexpected. So of those two extremes, where do you lean, and any thoughts on those?
Well, again, speaking about Burning Man, since that's the subject of this show, I think Burning Man happens too fast. You can't stage anything. Once you get out there, any plans that you may have had when you went out are out the window, because the whole thing is just this whirlwind experience. It's overwhelming. Everything is happening at the same time. You just have to go out with your cameras and just be ready for whatever happens. So I do a fair amount of planning, and when I get out there, all my plans are meaningless. But just it helps me to get in the right sort of frame of mind to do a little planning beforehand. But truly, it's a completely spontaneous thing.
Philip Kahn, who's considered to be, he was the founder of Borland and then Starfish Software in Santa Cruz, is credited for sharing the first pictures via a cell phone. And that was done from the maternity ward at the Santa Cruz Hospital when his daughter was born in 1997, and it was shared by 2,000 people. 3 years later, Samsung released their first phone with the camera. It had a 0.3 megapixel camera on board, and Nokia just released their latest version, which is a 41 megapixel camera. This number startled me, but it's estimated that every year there's 1 trillion photographs that are now shot. Being a professional photographer, someone who shoots to create art or communicate an idea, how do you believe that these camera phones have transformed your work? How have they changed you?
These are deep questions. Thank you, Bradley. I mean, I love a hard question.
You can answer it visually if you want.
I mean, gee, how do I answer that? I've got a camera in the back of my pocket, like everybody else in this room, I'm sure. Do I use it to make art? Hardly ever. Do I use it to remember the right type of shampoo when I'm at, the store, or, to send a message to my daughter, or to take a picture of a note that I just wrote down on a napkin, for example? This is really useful for those things, but to do these kind of pictures, I would never think to use my phone for that.
And yet, in this audience, there's a lot of photographers sitting here.
Yeah.
Some are, and there's a number of professional photographers. So how has your work shifted relative to this technology, would you say?
Yeah, and you're asking a really good question. The question is, does a camera make you a photographer? And I don't know if that does, because we all have cameras now. Some of them are better than others, but so having a camera, does that make you a photographer? And I'm not sure. Or maybe, I guess you could say, does writing an email make you a writer? We all write emails, right? But we're not all writers. So the question is what you do with it. And for me, at least, the goal is always to try to say something with an image, to try to capture something and then to convey something. So behind my best images, not all my images, but the best ones, have something that I'm trying to communicate. And that's what I think that's what separates somebody who's just taking, a snapshot from somebody who's trying to communicate something visually.
So it's been written that we're moving into a period where we're dominated by the visual culture. And some of that's with Snapchat and the fact that there's 1 billion phones sold a year. So I'm curious, has it changed the way you relate to your camera? Do you still carry it around everywhere, or do you think there's all these other photographers or amateur photographers that are going to beat you to the shot?
Okay, lots of questions. You know what? I don't worry too much about the competition. I know that there are fewer and fewer opportunities for paid work as a photographer, and I'm aware of that. And that sort of makes it problematic to make a living being a photographer. But beyond that, there's a shift that's happening where we need more photographers, because I think that we can learn faster through images than we can through text. And I think that we see thousands of images every day. We're scrolling through them on Instagram, we open the newspaper, we see them, we are on websites, so we're suffused with imagery in our daily lives. And so I think that we have to be able to communicate through images if we really have something important to say, because people simply don't have time to read anymore. Do you know, these days I go to YouTube. YouTube is my favorite way to learn anything. You can learn a great recipe. You can learn how to operate this camera that my friend Michael here is using to take some pictures tonight. that's my camera. But the camera is so complicated that, I mean, it's so advanced that there are some features that I don't even know how to use. But YouTube is great. So isn't it strange that I have the manual, but I don't use the manual? I go to YouTube. But that's because I'm a visual learner, and I think, like most of us, it's all happening through imagery, and imagery conveys information in a much more compelling and easily digestible way.
Do you like having your photograph taken?
No, I hate it. So that's one of the reasons I think that I gravitated toward photography. I like to be on the other side of the lens, yeah.
And yet, when we started talking about this show, you said, I really am excited about the portraits.
Yes. There aren't very many portraits on the walls here, but I like the portraits the best, because I think people are the most interesting thing to photograph. Pictures of art cars are cool, and pictures of art is cool. Pictures of the desert is nice. But there's something about portraits that speak to me personally. I like portraits.
In 2004, if I have the story right, your girlfriend, now wife, insisted that you go to Burning Man so you could better understand her.
Yeah, she did. Actually, she went with a few friends in 2000, and it took 4 years for her to finally persuade me to go, because I was convinced that I had absolutely no reason to go to Burning Man, that was so not my thing. All these dusty hippies in the desert was really not what I wanted to do. But I finally went as a favor to her, and then, I was kind of blown away.
So what did you learn about your wife-to-be that you learned at Burning Man? That's okay. We see pictures of her up here. I have no doubt.
Well, I learned something about what it was that made her feel so alive out there, and why she felt that I was missing something in my life, and that I could feel more alive if I went out there too. That was, I think, the original spirit, that she felt that there was something missing in our day-to-day life, and that we might be able to find it if we surrounded ourselves with a bunch of amazing artists who were involved in trying to make stuff, build community, experiment with new ideas in community building and how to design ephemeral cities, all that amazing stuff that happens out at Burning Man. So, and she was right.
And was that an aha moment for you?
Yeah. Yeah, you bet.
And she went from girlfriend to wife?
No, it's not quite like that. We actually already had kids. But something along the way, you know how it is. We got bogged down by day-to-day life, and at a certain point, she went to Burning Man, and then she said, let's go out there together the following year.
How would you describe Burning Man for any of us who've never been there?
I would describe it as a laboratory of creativity. So the whole event is sort of predicated on creative expression. And it's not a festival in the traditional sense that there's entertainment planned for you and that you go out there and you're dazzled by performances or you're entertained in some way by other people. The whole idea is you bring something out there that you want to give. So everybody has brought something that they want to share or that they want to express, and it could be anything. It could be playing the guitar, it could be dressing up in a beautiful outfit that you made, or it could be walking around on stilts, or it could be spitting fire, or it could be building an amazing art car, or it could be making a sculpture, or it could be painting somebody's face. It could be any number of things, or just being beautiful. You know, we're just giving people free hugs. You see sometimes people holding signs that say free hugs, and it's a little bit of a cliche, but it's actually pretty special. So yeah, so it could be any number of things, but the idea is that we all go out there thinking about, well, what can I give? So we're participants as opposed to spectators. And so it creates a very different environment where there's an intentionality behind what you can give as opposed to what you can get out of it. And so it's an unusual event that way.
Does being a photographer and carrying the camera around force you into more of a spectator role? Does it interfere with your experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was trained as a journalist, and as a journalist, we're taught how to be objective and how to faithfully record reality in order to document something or in order to share the news or whatever. And at Burning Man, that doesn't really work, because that would make you a spectator, and the whole idea of Burning Man is to go and be a participant, to participate fully and to give something back. So if I, as a photographer, am standing on the sidelines hoping that something interesting is about to happen that I can then capture, then I'm kind of violating the whole principle of participating. And so I've met a number of burners over the years who've told me, like, why don't you just put the camera down and, enjoy this moment with us, as opposed to try to stand, aside from it all and document it. And so I've had to learn how to use the camera in a more participatory way, and also learn how to get out of the documentarian mindset into more of a creative mindset. So I've had to learn how to make pictures as opposed to just sort of take them.
And have you concurred and put the camera down?
Yeah, I have a number of times. I had a really interesting thing happen one time. It was outside of a makeshift photo booth, and there was this woman who kind of lured me in and said, you want to take my picture? And she had like hardly any clothes up top, and it was kind of a gimmick. But of course I went in, and then she said, take your clothes off, to me. And I was like, hang on a second. And she said, no, take your clothes off. And then she took my camera, and then she held the camera at me, and she said, I just wanted you to know what it feels like to be naked having somebody pointing their camera at you. And that was the first year that I went to Burning Man, so that was really like eye-opening.
A number of indigenous cultures have believed that a photograph steals their soul. And I'm wondering if you've ever been accused of that when you shoot a portrait of somebody, and if that's occurred at Burning Man.
It's a good question. One of the things about Burning Man is that there's a very strong sort of principle of what's the word I'm looking for, of permission. You have to get people's permission before you shoot them. So, consent, thank you. Yeah, so the idea being that I don't want to go up and try to take something from you that you don't want to freely give. And so that creates a really wonderful atmosphere. And so most of the portraits that I take, all of the portraits I take virtually, are based on some kind of a, if not actual spoken consent, that a tacit consent that I want to try to make a picture of you in this moment, and we're creating something together, as opposed to me sort of trying to steal something on the fly.
2004 was your first year, and if I have the facts right, you've been back 13 consecutive years.
Right.
What's changed at Burning Man?
It's grown a lot bigger. There are now about 70,000 people. When I first started going, it was just under 30,000. And as the event has grown, there are a lot more rules. and there are a lot more reasons for insurance companies to meddle and decide, what has to, safety precautions and all kinds of stuff. So there are a lot more people with walkie-talkies walking around, making sure that everything is up to code and that nobody's going to get hurt. And so what that means is that there are a lot more rules, and it's not as freewheeling as it used to be. But all of that said, I still think that it's a hell of a good time. It's as fun as it ever was.
Larry Harvey, who's the founder of Burning Man, has been quoted saying that you don't come to Burning Man for the entertainment, but you are the entertainment.
Yeah. I don't think of myself as all that entertaining, but you know what? Making pictures together and doing something can be really fun.
What does it mean you said that Burning Man is a laboratory for creativity? Can you just expand on that?
Yeah, you know what? We all have a creative impulse. So we all have the desire to create. We do it naturally when we're kids, but somehow many of us outgrow it, unless we're in a profession that sort of demands that we're creative. But we're all humans, so we all have the capacity to create. But I think that we need more opportunities to sort of tap into that ability and that kind of native capacity that we all have, right? Well, at Burning Man, it's basically saying, don't come out here unless you can create, unless you can bring something, unless you can add something amazing to the mix, whatever it is, whether it's making incredible cocktails, or whether it's driving around in a janky old art car, or whether it's spinning fire or hula hooping, or it doesn't matter what it is, but add something. And so what it does is it asks all the participants to think about, well, what do I have to give? And that's a really kind of an amazing thing.
For many of us involved in the creative process, it's riddled with tension right up until that final product is produced, right until the deadline. And I'm wondering if that's true for you, and if so, how does that tension show up while shooting and creating at Burning Man?
Yeah, when I first started going out there, I was just messing around and having fun. And then in 2011, the editors of Rolling Stone contacted me, and they said, we really like your pictures of Burning Man. Would you consider an assignment shooting for Rolling Stone? And I thought, that sounds like fun. I had a few reservations. I have a dear friend of mine who shot for Rolling Stone in 2004. And at that time, they had some very snarky editors over at Rolling Stone. And so they took the images that he submitted and they paired them with a story written by one of their in-house editors in New York that was really critical of Burning Man and anything that sort of suggested hippies, nudity, counterculture, and all that. So they had taken his images that he had made with an immense amount of love and hard work. He had leaned on a lot of friends for favors to get lifted up in cherry pickers and taken out and flying around the city so he could get an aerial view. He'd really busted his butt getting these images. He got them to the editors in New York, and then they ran it with a story that was deeply critical of the event. So he was just crushed by that. And I thought, I would never want that to happen to me. I love the event. I don't want my images used in a way that I wouldn't approve of. So I said I would consider an assignment if you let me write the captions. And they said, well, that's not customary, but all right, we'll consider it. And so they went for it, and so I wound up covering it for Rolling Stone for 4 years.
How'd that turn out?
Yeah, and so I guess the reason I mentioned that was because there was a level of pressure on me as a photographer that I had never had before up to that point. And so shooting for editors in New York who are going to be sifting through my images, not knowing anything about the event, just going for the best image, what they considered, an editor's idea of the best picture and my idea of a good picture might be really different. And so I felt a lot of pressure to not only do a really good job for them, but also to be true to the spirit of the event itself.
Yeah, I think it's something we experience here where there's this duality. Everybody needs an editor, and nobody likes their editor.
Yeah, actually, I came to love my editors.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
But that time when you don't love your editors, when you have that creative tension,
Yeah.
and they get the final decision.
I grew by leaps and bounds actually from that assignment, because they did something with my photography that I hadn't known to do myself that was really interesting. So it taught me about something that was in the pictures that they were able to see that I hadn't been able to find. So it was a very good learning experience for me.
Both you and Sidney Erthel, who's the other photographer featured in Burning Man Art on Fire, I read that you set out not to make a book about art, but to document the celebration of artistic expression that is Burning Man.
Did I say that?
Well, it was it's written about the two of you in this book, so I'm not sure if you said that or Sidney said that.
I'm not sure either.
So do you agree with that statement? Did you set out to celebrate the art or to create it?
It's a touchy subject, because I came into that book project very late in the game, and I'm kind of the add-on third party. And so it was a project that I didn't have a whole lot of creative input in. But I felt that, well, if they use my images, then, and I know what my images are about, then I felt that, yeah, that's what it is. It's about celebrating the spirit of creativity through the art of Burning Man. And that book, by the way, it's called Art on Fire, and it's really about the art at Burning Man. Burning Man is not only about art, but art is a really important component. Burning Man is also about people, and it's about culture, and it's about community building, and it's about art cars, and it's about spending a week off the grid. It's about being in a temporary community that doesn't use money. It's about many different things in addition to art, but art is one important, crucial aspect of it. And the editors of this book wanted to focus on the art. So that meant that I had to limit my images to primarily images of art. And I felt that I'm leaving out some of the best stuff that I have, which is images of people. So that's my one reservation about the book. It feels to me like it's just sort of a kind of a narrow view of Burning Man. It's not the full picture.
So you've touched on this very subject of creative tension. I'm curious how you resolve that for yourself, because it sounds like you would have gone a different direction.
Oh yeah, heck yes. Yeah, because as a photographer, and anybody who's an artist here in this room knows that you got to be passionate about what it is that you're doing, because if you don't bring love to it, then it's kind of empty. So if you want to do a job well, you have to infuse it with some element of passion. And so for me, the portraits are the most vibrant, dynamic part of what I do every year out at Burning Man. And so the fact that I couldn't include my portraits was kind of a bummer.
So does that mean we have another book forthcoming?
Yeah, I'm actually working on one.
Do we have any publishers in the house that want to publish a book?
Thanks, Bradley. I appreciate that.
We print on newsprint. You do not want to print. We can do your book on newsprint. That's fine, Scott. Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, right.
You brought up this, that Burning Man has this unique, you referenced it, they have a unique take on commerce, and with no money exchanged. It sort of turns capitalism on its head, if I understand it. And is it a moneyless utopia?
No, it's not a utopia, because it's sometimes closer to a train wreck. And also, the fact is that, let's be real, it takes a ton of money to get yourself out to Burning Man. You have to spend all this money on camping equipment, on food, on fuel, whatever it is that you're going to need when you're out there. So you have to spend a lot of money to get out there in order to not spend any money. So, this isn't lost on the organizers, but, Larry Harvey, who founded the event, I think he was right, and he was saying that if you make money part of the equation out there, then people aren't truly giving. They're selling. So what happens if nobody sells anything, and if everything is given freely, what will happen? And I think what he's discovered, and I think this is part of what makes it an interesting experiment, a social experiment, is that when people give freely, with no expectation of return, there's this amazing aspect of community building that happens where you feel grateful and almost indebted, but in a good way toward all the people that you meet. And so it builds a really strong community. And it's fabulous. It's fabulous not to take your wallet out all week. It's amazing. And everything is provided. So if you need, an inner tube for your tire because, you got a flat tire on your bike, there's always somebody who's willing to give you one, literally give you one. Because, he brought extra, just in case you might need it, that kind of thing. It's really, really amazing.
One of the criticisms I heard this week from one of our staff at the Weekly is that the tickets have gone from what was $75 to now more than $400. And as I've looked into Burning Man, having not been there, there's certainly some criticism that it's becoming an event for the wealthy and for the white wealthy, that it's not a highly multicultural event. Do you think that's a fair criticism? Is that where Burning Man's going?
I think it's a valid criticism. I don't think that it's the only criticism worth talking about. I mean, I think there are a lot of potential problems, but this is one that's gotten a lot of attention in the media. It's not that diverse if you look at it sort of from a racial, ethnic perspective in terms of the racial and ethnic makeup of Americans, but if you look at the fact that now closer to 30% of all people at Burning Man come from abroad, it's very diverse. You hear like every language out there, and people come from near and far, and many of them are artists who have built these installations, and they've actually transported them so that they can display them at Burning Man because it's become such a well-known art event. So there's a lot of diversity. It just depends how you measure it. But what you're saying is that it's becoming less and less diverse economically because low-income people might not be able to afford the expense of getting out there, whereas the rich people can. And I think we all agree that's a problem. It's becoming gentrified. And so the organizers at Burning Man are trying to figure out structural ways that they can ensure that all people have access to Burning Man. And so they give away low-income tickets every year, several thousand, and they also prevent rich people from from bringing in caterers and from having RVs delivered that are just ready for them to fly in, and basically they have everything provided. They want to level the experience so that it's equal for everybody. Everybody has to work to get out there, they have to prepare and so on. But it's tough. It's a structural challenge, and so it's a fair criticism.
And there's a word, and maybe somebody knows it in the audience, that Larry Harvey's used for not only that you described that people just come with the expectation of being served,
Yeah.
but also people that come and once they get their glitter on, that's it. They're no longer in service. They're off in their glitter.
Sparkle ponies.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sparkle ponies.
Yes.
Do we have any sparkle ponies in the house?
No, it's a term of derision, so you wouldn't want to admit that you're a sparkle pony unless you're feeling really snarky, or unless you're trying to sort of like state the obvious so that somebody will give you something for free.
And yet probably every community has its share of sparkle ponies.
Of course.
Every family.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you haven't raised children? Come on now.
That's right.
Last year, approximately 70,000 people went to Black Rock City in Nevada for Burning Man, and which is a little less than the number of people that attend one San Francisco 49ers football game. And as you mentioned, it has this international appeal today. But I'm curious if how you would describe Burning Man. Is it its own culture? Is it a counterculture?
I think of it as a hell of a good party, but it's so much more. But for people who like to party, it's one of the best parties on the planet. So for a lot of people, that's their primary motivation. And so they come in expecting to party, and that's what they do. But there are also lots of people who come out there for the art. And that's the sole reason they come out there. And they're not interested in partying. They're not interested in drugs or in loud music or in anything but the art. And that's a real core group. And then there's some people who are in it for the social experiment. They love the community building, and they're part, did you know that 85% of all the people who set up Burning Man are volunteers? Has a huge volunteer base. And these people do it chiefly for community, because, once you become part of a community and you're creating something together, you bond with people, and you have so much more of a good time if you're bonded with a group of people that you really like. So that's a real important element. So I always say that as good a party as it is, it's an even better community, and it's an even better art event.
So what is it about this culture that is Burning Man that brings birth to this creative expression?
Well, it could be embedded in what they call the 10 principles. They have basically 10 ideas or core values that are not prescriptive, they're descriptive, meaning that Larry Harvey, who founded the event, realized at a certain point, like, well, what is it that makes Burning Man as a culture so unique? And so he started to sort of articulate and try to jot down, like, well, it's based on the idea of a gift economy. It's based on the idea of participation rather than spectating. It's based on the idea of self-reliance and a few other things. And then he thought, well, all of these things make Burning Man rather unique. So they created these 10 principles, and so that kind of describes the culture, but it's not meant to be a cult. If that's not your viewfinder, if that's not your particular outlook, if you don't care for the principles, that doesn't mean you shouldn't come. Bring whatever you have, and let's celebrate that.
I read that Larry Harvey is, everywhere he goes, he's identified as the founder of Burning Man, and it's, as he says, it's both the blessing and the curse, because everybody just wants to talk about Burning Man.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's starting to happen for you.
Well, see, so here, you're asking me a lot about Burning Man, and I'm just a photographer. I didn't start the event. But I have to be able to say something about Burning Man in order for me to convey what the images are about. So I feel like there's nothing wrong with talking about Burning Man. I love Burning Man, but and it's the focus of this particular photo project that I've been working on for a really long time. So I don't mind talking about Burning Man, but I get a little worried sometimes when people sort of call me, a Burning Man photographer as opposed to just a photographer, because I'm just one guy who happens to go to the event, and I'm critical of a lot of stuff there. And I get kind of cranky sometimes. So, I'm not proselytizing, or I'm not advocating that everybody in this room should go to Burning Man. It's something that you feel called to do, and it's an event that it requires a lot of planning to go, but for the right people, it can be really transformative.
My last question before we open it up to the audience is, I'm curious, and I know you're not supposed to have a favorite child, but is there a particular piece in this show that you have affinity towards? A special affinity? Your favorite?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have many favorites. There's one in particular that I resonate with, and it's kind of behind me over here. It's of the two lovers in blue body paint. But it's a very personal reason, not because it's a great photo. It's more because that was the first time, when I shot that picture in 2009, that was the first time that I realized that I had the capacity to make a photo, as opposed to just be in the right place at the right time and happen upon something interesting. Because with that couple, there wasn't going to be a great photo happening unless I made it happen. And so I had to really work with them and say, you guys are really lovely, and this is what I see, and can we do some stuff together to create something together. And so it was a participatory moment with the three of us. And so I discovered something about my own capacity, so I have a very strong attachment to that photo. Yeah.
It's for sale tonight, Scott, so you do.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a mic for the audience? Or if not, we'll just repeat the questions. Anyone have a question for Scott London? Here we go.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
The question is, are there rules about flying drones? unmanned cameras, basically, that are hovering above the event. And yes, there are permits you need to get, and there are only 30 permits given out every year. And last year I got one, which was awesome. But since I don't fly a drone myself, I worked with a drone pilot, and he operated the drone for me, and then I directed him. So I became kind of like Francis Ford Coppola or somebody, telling him what I wanted, and then he did all the fidgeting with the drone. So it meant that I got some really amazing aerial photos, and I got to put my name on them, even though he was operating the machinery.
Is that photo of Black Rock City from a drone?
There's one here that is.
It's around the corner.
No, not that one. That one was shot out of a plane. There is one, and it's at the top in the middle over there, and it's was taken last year with a drone. Yeah.
Do you do any motion photography there?
I haven't.
So the question is, do you do any motion photography there?
Yeah, there are a lot of wonderful videographers and photographers who work with, like you said, motion, or they do time lapse and all kinds of creative things. And it's not that I wouldn't do that. It's just that I feel like they do that really well, and I like to do my thing. Yeah.
What did you use for a camera on
I use the.
Question is, what did you use for a camera? I'll help you out here.
Thanks, Bradley. I just used the regular camera that was built into the drone. It's a DJI 4. It comes with an inbuilt camera, and it managed to produce a print that's hanging on the wall, so not bad.
What do you normally shoot with?
What do I normally shoot with?
Yeah, what camera do you use?
I use Canon equipment, digital SLRs, and I've been using them ever since I first started going out, which is over 10 years, and they work great.
What lenses? What's the range?
I use zoom lenses for when I shoot art, and then I switch lenses when I do portraiture, and I use a 35 millimeter and an 85 millimeter. So I carry two camera bodies on me.
The question is?
The question is, some of the images are similar in terms of their lighting and their look and feel. Were they taken at the same time or in similar weather conditions? And you're asking a great question, because one of the things that makes Burning Man so unique from a photographic standpoint is that it's an environment like you've never seen anywhere else. It's a dry lake bed that's absolutely flat and usually cracked. But then when 70,000 people get out there, they pulverize the surface, and it turns into this really fine dust. And then when the afternoon winds kick up, the dust lifts off the ground, and you get these weird dust storms. But even without the actual full-on dust storm, you get always this wispy dust in the air that reflects the light, and so it makes things look like they're glowing. So that's probably what you're referring to, is that a lot of the images have that kind of that film of dust in the air.
Do you ever follow someone year to year?
Yeah, do I ever follow like the same subject year after year? And yes, I do. I have some favorite people that I come back to year after year because they're friends of mine now. And there are people that I photographed like all 13 years. Yeah, you bet.
So the question is, are the architectural structures, I'm doing this because we're filming this.
Good.
Are the architectural structures burned or destroyed? Is that your question? Do they recycle them?
I think a mix of all three. Some they dismantle, especially the ones made out of metal, and some of the artists can, they can breathe new life into them. So some of these, can be found in places like Las Vegas, for example. And sometimes they're even brought back a second time at a later Burning Man. But a lot of the wooden structures are burned at the end of the event. And I have a friend of mine who built an amazing wooden sculpture that was huge. And there was a risk that they weren't going to get to burn it because the winds were really strong and it was going to be a fire hazard. So they came to him and they said, you know what, you're going to have to haul this out of here. And he said, you know what, I'm out of money. We're going to have to burn this thing. So they waited for the right conditions, and they came, and then they torched the whole thing, and it burned up in a blaze of glory. So.
Kevin, so the question is, was Scott involved with the Burning Man organization in producing the book?
They do have very strict rules about how to, they have an image use policy that's very strict. And it's a bummer for people like me. But on the other hand, it protects the event against images being used out of context. And it also prevents really the wrong types of usage, people going out there and shooting porn flicks, for example. And my friend Michael over here, who is also a Burning Man photographer, can probably speak to this. We all have to sign a long contract before we go out there that it promises that we won't publish anything without written permission from Burning Man. So that means that anytime I get a magazine or Rolling Stone wants to publish my images, they have to review them first and then say, okay. And the primary thing that they're trying to do is to protect the privacy of individuals who go, so they don't want nudity or drug use or anything like that in the photos. So, but it puts a damper on things. It means that I can't just do whatever I want with the photos. So when it came time to make this book, we knew that every image that was going to be in the book had to be reviewed, and that all the text had to be reviewed by the gatekeepers at Burning Man. And just from a sort of creative standpoint, I felt that I didn't want to have editors review absolutely everything that I did, that I should have artistic license to create the kind of book I wanted to create. But we didn't get that. We had to get it reviewed. And I think 7 or 8 people had to okay it, basically sign their little initials, and some of them had a lot of comments. They wanted to change this and that, and they didn't think that this looked good, and could we do this from a different angle, and all that stuff. It was annoying.
Does the organization get any profit from the book? Sorry.
As a matter of fact, yes. And this is a huge point of contention among a lot of artists. 10% of all gross receipts from the sale of books, movies, films, documentaries, videos, any kind of creative stuff that's based on Burning Man, pays a royalty to use the Burning Man trademark. So that means that 10% of the profits from our book go back to the Burning Man organization.
We have time for 2 more questions. Yes? Have you had problems with your lenses and cameras and protecting them from the dust storms?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. And the fact is that I haven't. I dropped a lens one time just because I was not paying attention, and that's the only time I've had a problem. But from the dust, no, I never had a problem. And one time I took my lenses down to Canon to get them cleaned after being to Burning Man, and it was real. The camera was just, it was all white, covered with dust and all this grime. And I said, is this going to be a problem? I was worried they were going to charge me a lot, you know. And they kind of laughed at me and they said, you're kidding me, right? That's what these cameras are built for. They say, we'll clean it for free. Come back and pick it up tomorrow. So it was amazing.
Michael, do you want to repeat that back?
Could you summarize that for us, Bradley?
So what are the personal or spiritual transformations that have occurred while you've been on La Playa, and how have those informed your life or your work?
You know, it's really funny that you should ask me this, because just before we started, Michael himself was telling us about the transformative experiences he's had. So I feel that you're the best person to answer that question. But have I been transformed out there? Heck yes. That's one of the reasons why I go back out there. I found an aspect of myself out there that I didn't know I had, and that's really wonderful. But you know, I'm not different from a lot of people. And so that's the part of the reason why a lot of us keep on going back year after year. There's something really magical that happens. And the thing about Burning Man is it's ephemeral. So they create a city at the end of August, and it exists for basically 1 week. And then, you know, everybody leaves, and then the desert is scrubbed clean again, and then it goes back into a state of nature, and there's no trace of there having been an event there. All that we have, you know, are the memories and the photographs to remember it by. And so there's this feeling that many of us have that we get to do this 1 week out of the year, and so it's very special, and we bring a lot of intentionality to it. sort of what do I want to create? What do I want to give? What kind of community do I want to build? And with 70,000 people all bringing that same kind of energy and spirit to an event, I don't think that it has to be a spiritual thing. It can be, and for many of us it is. But I think it can also be an artistic thing, or it can just be a feeling of like, this is my family. But regardless of what it is, it's very deeply enriching on a personal level, and I think that's the reason why so many of us feel so close to this event. So, does that come close to beginning to answer the question?
It's all ephemeral, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's all ephemeral. That's what Michael said. Yeah. Yeah.
Scott's images will be on the wall of the press club until mid-April, and they are for sale, and I would certainly encourage you to take a close look. And we have one book that we're going to, I don't think it's signed yet. Perfect. So you can get it signed tonight. See Scott afterwards. Scott London, thanks so much for all you do and for coming to join us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.